January 28th, 1986. A frozen morning, 7 lives lost in less than 2 minutes, and a nation watching in hope turned instantly to disbelief. The world heard NASA's promises, safe odds, and flawless systems. But I saw the truth in the numbers they hid, and the warnings they ignored. I was dying, but I would not let a lie bury the Challenger's crew. What happens when a scientist stands against an entire institution's facade? That is where this story begins. The launch pad looked like something out of a bad dream. Icicles hung from the metal scaffolding, some nearly a foot long. The air stung at 28 degrees, colder than any shuttle launch before. At 11:38 that morning, Challenger's engines lit up, and the world held its breath. Krista McAuliffe's students watched from their classroom televisions, teachers pointing at the screen, proud to see one of their own reaching for the stars. Reporters, politicians, engineers, all eyes were fixed on Kennedy Space Center. NASA had promised routine, but nothing about that day felt normal. The night before, a group of engineers at Morton Thiokol pleaded with their managers, "Don't launch below 53 degrees." They had seen the O-rings fail in tests when the rubber got cold, losing their grip and letting fire slip through. Roger Borjoli, one of the engineers, later said he fought like hell to stop it, but the managers overruled them after a tense teleconference with NASA. Larry Malloy, the NASA booster chief, brushed off the warnings. He said, "My God, Thiokol, when do you want me to launch next April?" The call ended with the decision to go for launch. The warning stopped there. At 73 seconds after liftoff, Challenger vanished in a white and orange bloom. 7 people gone in an instant. The debris rained down for an hour. For a moment, the only sound was static. The broadcast cut to stunned anchors, their faces blank. The official word was an anomaly, but I knew the truth could not be hidden behind technical jargon. The numbers, the charts, the ignored memos, they all pointed to the same thing. This was not just an accident. It was the result of silenced voices and a system more concerned with appearances than with reality. The loss was not just 7 lives. It was trust, broken in front of millions. The cold was not just in the air. It was in the way the warnings were dismissed. 3 days after the explosion, the White House acted. By executive order, President Reagan created the Presidential Commission on the Space Shuttle Challenger accident. The date was February 3rd, 1986. The man chosen to lead it was William Rogers, a lawyer and former Secretary of State. He was polished, careful, and above all, trusted by the administration to keep order. His mandate was broad, to find out what happened and recommend fixes, but I could sense the real assignment: protect the shuttle program's reputation and, by extension, NASA's. Neil Armstrong sat as vice chairman. The first man on the moon, quiet and reserved, he brought a certain gravity to the table. Around us sat generals, astronauts, and government officials. Sally Ride, the first American woman in space, watched everything with a scientist's eye and a poker face. General Donald Kutina, sharp and wry, seemed to know where all the bodies were buried. William Graham, acting NASA administrator, had once been my student at Caltech. Now he was the agency's spokesman, threading the needle between honesty and damage control. William Lucas, director of the Marshall Space Flight Center, represented the old NASA, proud, defensive, and unwilling to admit mistakes. Our first public hearing was set for February 6th in Washington, D.C. The room filled with reporters and television cameras. Rogers spoke first, promising a thorough, fair investigation. But I could not ignore the undertone. The commission structure put power in Rogers' hands. He controlled the agenda, who spoke, and for how long. Questions had to be submitted in advance. Side investigations were discouraged. Anything that might embarrass NASA was quietly redirected or delayed. From the start, I felt like an outsider. My instincts told me the answers would not come from prepared statements or official timelines. They would come from engineers, from raw data, from the cracks in the story. But every move I made seemed to brush up against invisible walls. Rogers wanted order, predictability, and above all, no surprises. I wanted the truth, wherever it led. The stage was set for a collision between politics and physics. The evidence didn't arrive with a bang. It came in whispers, glances, and folded sheets of paper. Sally Ride kept her face unreadable in every meeting, but one afternoon, as we left the hearing room, she drifted close to General Kutina. No words, just a slight movement of her hand. A single page slipped from her notebook to his. Later, Kutina showed me what she had risked her career to pass along. A 2-column table. On one side, temperatures. On the other, how the O-ring rubber lost its spring as the numbers dropped. At 53 degrees, the seal barely rebounded. Below freezing, it was as stiff as wood. That chart was proof. Cold killed the Challenger, not just bad luck. Kutina played it smart. He never told me where the table came from. Instead, he invited me to dinner, pulled out a carburetor from his latest project, and asked, "Professor, what happens to rubber seals when they get cold?" I knew at once. The O-rings in those boosters were up against temperatures they had never faced. 28 degrees at launch, when the coldest previous flight had been 53. The numbers on Sally's chart matched what the engineers had warned about for months. Roger Boisjoli's memo sat heavy in my mind. He had written, "We stand on the verge of a catastrophe." Alan McDonald, Theocol's launch director, told the commission flat out, "We recommended not to launch." But management ignored them. NASA's official line claimed the odds of disaster were 1 in 100,000. The real number, if you listen to the engineers, was closer to 1 in 50. That was not just a mistake. It was a lie, dressed up in probability to keep the program moving and the money flowing. I started to see the outlines of a cover-up. The people who knew the most were being pushed aside or silenced. The numbers told a story no press release could erase. What I discovered next changed everything. Subscribe if you want to see how one physicist took on NASA. On February 11, 1986, I sat in the hearing room, watching the same dance of evasion and half answers. Charts, memos, technical jargon, all of it could be twisted or buried. But physics does not bend for politics. I had spent the night before hunting for a simple C-clamp at a hardware store, then pried a strip of O-ring rubber from a shuttle model with a pair of pliers. That morning, I asked a waiter for a glass of ice water. Nothing fancy, just water and ice. About 32 degrees, the same cold that had gripped the launch pad. As the hearing droned on, I pressed the O-ring into the clamp, squeezed it flat, and lowered it into the glass of ice water. The room buzzed with side talk. General Kutina leaned over and whispered, "Not now." I waited. When Rogers finally nodded my way, I spoke up. I pulled the O-ring from the ice water, unclamped it, and held it up for the cameras. The rubber stayed flat, stiff, refusing to spring back. I said I took this stuff that was supposed to seal the joints, put it in ice water for a few minutes. It did not recover. I believe that had some significance. The silence was immediate. No chart, no number, no memo could hide what everyone had just seen. On live television, the truth was undeniable. The O-rings lost their resilience in the cold. NASA had launched anyway. Rogers looked uneasy. Later, in the men's room, I heard him mutter to Neil Armstrong, "Feynman is becoming a real pain in the ass." Maybe so. But the facts did not care about his comfort. I was not there to make friends. I was there because 7 people were dead, and the truth mattered more than anyone's reputation. The commission filed its report on June 9th, 1986. I insisted on attaching my own appendix, Appendix F. I wrote, "For a successful technology, reality must take precedence over public relations, for nature cannot be fooled." Those words stayed, locked into the record. They could not be edited away. The truth, once shown, could not be made to vanish. Truth and accountability don't expire. Today, space agencies still face pressure to protect reputations over lives. NASA's public odds of 1 in 100,000 were used to mask real engineer warnings, and silence still risks disaster. The lesson remains: physics doesn't care about politics. Only honesty keeps the next launch safe.